With OP15 officially out in Japan, we've started to come together to see what exactly these decks look like, and we also have a major championship that happened in the previous weekend that showcased a lot of these different decks. If you haven't seen that championship, I do have a playlist on the channel that has me commentating every single round, and it's actually quite exciting. Not only with the brand new decks that we saw, but also some old ones that have a resurgence in this format. Today, we're just going to be talking about the brand new leaders and what those decks look like. I've got a couple different deck lists for each of the leaders that we're going to go over, compare them also side by side. And in another video coming later this week, we're going to talk about a ton of different deck lists for existing leaders that have come into the game, because there's actually a few leaders like Kalgara and Zoro Sanji, in my opinion, that got a huge boost within this set and are much more viable within the format, even before talking about the upcoming ban list update. We'll start off with the strongest leader from OP15, Enel, in my opinion. But first, let's hear from more from our sponsor. Ned just put up 2 brand new pre-orders on their website, and they're some of my favorite products that they've done yet. The first one being the Empress playmat. You can style out your deck with your favorite waifu while also wearing some brand new crossbody bags. The crossbody bags are a great design and size to fit your deck box, dice, everything you need. They come in one of 2 beautiful styles, varying in color. Both the playmat and the crossbody bags are hot right now, so go ahead and make your order before they run out. And if you want to get them both, there's a special deal going on right now. If you go ahead and pre-order the Empress playmat and also get a crossbody bag, you'll get $5 off the crossbody bag. This $5 deal also works with any Ned playmat on their website. And you can use my code Atrocious at checkout to get 10% off of that on your order. There's no better time to style out your game with Ned, the sponsor of this video. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. The link will be down in the description below. And again, use code Atrocious to save money at checkout. Hope you're as ready as I am to rock this new stuff, and let's get back to the video. If you want to see all the deck lists yourself for all the leaders and also maybe get some copy paste for Sim now that Batsu has updated Sim with OP15, you get all these lists on eggmanevents.com. I personally upload all of these deck lists onto his OP15 page, and every single list that we're going to talk about is on this page as well. But let's start off with Enel. Enel, in my opinion, is heralded as one of the best decks, if not in the OP15 format, and definitely among the brand new leaders. If you don't know about this leader, it's a 5 life, 5,000 power mono purple Sky Island leader. Under the rules of the game, your Dawn deck can only consist of 6 cards. So in this deck especially, you're not going to be playing anything 7 cost and above, similar to Silver's Rayleigh. He's got an activate main though once per turn that if it is your second turn or later, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active, and then set up 4 additional Dawn cards and rest them. Then you can give up to 4 rested Dawn to one of your character. This has made Enel in the forefront of the meta, in my opinion, as the premier aggro deck of the format. Even as you can see in this deck list, a lot of 1-drop bodies. All of those bodies, especially with your leader effect, can swing at least 6,000 power. Then you combo it with the big boss monsters, and you've got a very dangerous field alongside your different events. This specifically is the list that came out of the corporate summit that we watched here on the YouTube channel. That was the Enel player that we saw multiple times on the stream. And there's some interesting things about this list, right? There's some staple cards inside this deck, including Charlotte Pudding. Charlotte Pudding, being able to find event cards within the top 4 is great when your deck is... How many different events are in this deck? 24 different events in this specific deck list. A lot of your other 1-drops, including Ohm, Satori, Shura, all have this on play ability of Dawn -1 to draw 1 card, giving you the opportunity to replace the card in the hand and dig a little deeper in your deck. We even saw a handful of times on the stream that in the first turn of the game, whether the Enel player was going first or second, they would almost always utilize the on play Dawn -1 to draw 1 card, even if it would put them at 0 Dawn in the turn, because, especially with Enel's leader effect, let's say that you do go first, you do that Dawn -1, you draw 1 card. Going into your second turn, you have 2 Dawn because of the Dawn phase. And then through your activating main, you can just get all that Dawn back to go to 6. Even though you started your turn technically on your second turn of the game, you started with 0 Dawn. So it makes it so, especially in the early game, you can be aggressive trying to find different pieces, but also set up your hand and establish your board without having to worry about losing out on too much Dawn like in a deck like Reiju. All 3 of these 1-drops that I talked about, the Sky Island 1-drops, very, very good in my opinion. Ohm being able to minus 1000 power on a character during your turn, being able to control the board a little bit. Satori being able to manipulate the top couple cards to be able to know exactly what you're going to find or maybe put away what you don't need. And then Shura, just a super aggressive body. We even saw Shura in one of the games claim the win because of being able to play it down for just 1 Dawn and then use your leader effect to get a huge swing onto it, because if you have 6 or less Dawn cards on your field, this character has Rush. One thing that you'll see in a couple of these deck lists is Enel, the secret rare 6 cost, is definitely a 4 of, right? Not only if you have 6 or less Dawn, it's a 10k character that cannot be removed from the field by opponent's effects. It's got that on play of being able to search for a card within that top 5 and grab any of those 5. Doesn't have to specifically be Sky Island, doesn't have to be a character card or an event card. It can be literally anything. And then this Enel also very, very strong, but I have seen different deck lists that if you browsed all the different deck lists on Eggman events, some people run 3 of these, some people maybe only run 2 of these, but this person running a full 4. He's got that same plus power and immovable object kind of effect, but his activate main makes him a blocker, which especially for a 10,000 power character means that you're almost going to free block anything. The Divine Soldier, Heavenly Warriors, whatever you want to call it, is specifically just a little chum blocker, right? Because if you have 6 or less Dawn, this character gains blocker. Some people run it, some people don't, especially with a lot of different resting effects or removal effects in the format. A lot of times chum blockers just don't make sense. It's very specific in the matchup that you want to play it down. Going over what I would call the staple events within Enel, L4 is an incredible one, right? Giving a leader or character plus 1000 power, and then KOing a 3000 power character or less is looking at the amount of power currently on a card. It is not looking at base power. So that's going to be impactful as we look at the other different cards in terms of the events that Enel has. But even so, just the plus 1000 power is actually hugely influential. Think about, we saw in the championships, you had that 1-drop Shura on the field, no Dawn left as active. You tapped out all of your 6. You could use L4 to go ahead, just Dawn -1, and you can get that plus 1000 power on Shura or even your leader to gain that extra power even though you tapped out, because your leader effect is just going to be able to bring that Dawn right back. Lightning Beast Kitten is one of those previously mentioned power minusing cards that fit really well with L Thor, right? Being able not only to replace itself in the hand with that draw 1, but minus 1000 power on your opponent's side of the field. The power minusing is great, right? Because you not only have Mama Ragon, which can rest a current 5000 power or less character, while also replacing itself in the hand, but you also have Lightning Dragon, right? Lightning Dragon, once again, replacing itself in the hand. I think you're starting to see a theme here with this draw 1. This freezes a 6000 power or less character, cannot become active in the opponent's next refresh phase. Those 4 combinations of events synergize so well together just on the offensive side for the Enel deck, and then Elthor, Lightning Beast Kitten, and Mama Ragon all have a counter phase that give you plus power. Elthor and Lightning Beast Kitten being 2000 power addition, but Mama Ragon being plus 1000 power and drawing 1 card. Again, just another way to replace itself in the hand. Some of the tech cards that we see as well in terms of the different events is Gamma Knife, right? You have a lot of just raw draw, and especially searchable off of the Searcher Enel and the Searcher Pudding, means that really any event within your deck is viable, and especially having different effects of KOing different small-bodied characters, freezing them, or even resting them in general. Gamma Knife is a really good addition because that's minus 5000 power in total. That's so nice. And Hydra as well. Another tech option that we see within this deck is just an additional minus 3000 power. So you can kind of start to see the synergy, especially when you talk about the different combos and stuff that you can use within this deck. deck to be able to get these special effects on these power minus characters. It's like, it's a really aggressive deck, but also, I don't know, it's almost like a kind of control-y aspect to it as well, where you can have really good board removal. You can have really good aggression comboed with this minusing, especially because you have so much just raw draw one. It's hard sometimes for the Enel to just whiff. Fari is also kind of one of those tech options in the Enel deck as well. This is the most common tech option, I would say, that you'll see. It's not mandatory to play in the deck because that main phase is really only valuable in a lot of different matchups to draw one card, but gaining the cost until the end of the opponent's next turn does have some value in terms of when you talk about stuff like Jozu in Ace or other decks, or just different removal options in general. This is also a plus 2,000 power. We'll go into this version of Enel next, and mostly the same, but you see a couple different character cards that were not present in the first list. The first one, the most common that I see, is Holly. I think definitely like the first weekend of the OP15 format, Holly really didn't see a ton of play, but now that we've got like a week later under our belt, Holly has seen more and more play, in my opinion, in these different deck lists from flagships and different tournaments of the sort. Being able to give all of your Ohm cards and this character double attack, especially when we talked about the potential aggression of Enel's leader effect and also different cards like El Thor, having that double attack can actually be a huge deal. Plus, on your opponent's turn, this sets all of your Ohm characters and this character to 6,000 base power. That's especially impactful because, especially if you look at this Ohm or the Holly, they're 2,000 and 4,000 power respectively as base. They're very easy to remove on the field from battle with other different searchers or different yellow cards that we'll talk about here in the future. So being able to get that plus 6,000 power boost means that you can counter a little bit easier to keep these characters alive, or maybe it's not worth for your opponent to swing. It's better to just swing in at lead and try to pace you in the game. Sanji is also a very good 2K that we see within the deck, right, very frequently, not only because it's just a good 2K, and especially with that, if the number of Dawn cards on your field is 2 less than the number on your opponent's field, give this character -3 cost. You can actually play this character for 3 very early within the game because you can only have 6 Dawn on your field. As soon as your opponent hits 8 Dawn, boom, you can slam this guy down for 3. But the biggest thing is because you run the 1-drop Pudding Searcher, you can actually find it. It's a searchable 2K off of your Charlotte Pudding. So it's essentially double searchable, like I was saying earlier with the different events, because this can literally find anything in your deck and Pudding can find it. The final one that I'll talk about is Magellan. Now, I don't see Magellan often within these decks, but especially as we talked about how with Enel, you don't really care about the Dawn minusing on your side because you're going to be able with your leader effect to get that Dawn right back. It doesn't really matter in a lot of situations. And so Magellan can be utilized in this deck, not only because Magellan can be found off of Enel, right, the secret rare, but it's a sticky body on the field. Now, I bring up Magellan last because it is a block 1 card that is going to rotate within the format, so it's not as impactful within the West as it currently is in the East, since they do have about a month of OP15 before rotation hits for them, because that is on April 1st. But I thought this was a really, really cool card to utilize. And then the final deck list that I have for you for Enel in this video, right, we see the Holly and the Sanji, right, 2 cards that we talked about and how good they could be in the deck, but also Rosinante and Law. I thought that this was a really interesting tech card within this deck, right? You talk about how this 6 cost Enel is a blocker on the field, but you have to utilize the activate main and trash a card out of your hand in order to gain that blocker status. Sometimes it just doesn't necessarily work to have that blocker on the field every single turn. So what if you instead just played something that is always going to have blocker, right? This Rosinante and Law being an 8,000 power blocker, still very respectful within the format, to where this Enel is a -1, right, with its activate main to be a blocker. So there's pros and cons of running it, especially because there's actually not too much of a difference between searching for this Rosinante and Law and searching for this Enel, just simply because Pudding can only find find events, so it can't find either of these. But once again, this searcher Enel finds literally any card, enabling you to have different plays like this Rosinante Law. We also see Divine Departure within the deck, which I actually really like this card in the deck, right? Being the minus 8,000 power in the game was hugely influential that we saw in the championships. I believe it was one of the Lucy matches. There was just some disgusting plays that the opponent was able to make where they Divine Departure the 9,000 power Sabo blocker and then immediately rested it with Mama Ragon, right? Because it's a 5,000 power or less character than at that time being a 1k character, to be able to then go in and kind of swing in for lethal or just removing it on the field. I don't know the exact best way to build Enel, rounding out the third of the 3 deck lists that I'm showing in this video, but there's a lot of different plays to be able to utilize with it, and especially with the 2 searchers, again, of Enel and also Charlotte Pudding, there's so much potential of different tech cards, different opportunity cards that you can play within this deck. I'm going to talk about Rebecca next. I think there's a lot of people that are super interested about this leader. It may not be one of the strongest OP15 leaders, but it still has seen a bit of success when you talk about things like flagships and stuff like that, especially in the early stages of this game. We'll talk about the core cards first of Rebecca that I see in every single list, even though I'm only showing you 2 of them in this video. Rebecca's the first one, right? This is a searcher Rebecca card, especially with that Dawn ×1 of just being a cheap little chum blocker. You can get double value out of this card, which is super influential when it's a 1k as well. Now, it's common in the One Piece card game in the last year for these searchers to have double value potential, where they not only have their on-play effect of searching, but they have a secondary effect as well that they can utilize sometime in the game. Definitely a staple. Now, Leo is one of those 1-drops that have a protection effect that any deck can utilize, and especially as we talk about the other decks that get boosted in OP15 that are not an OP15 specific leader, there are a lot of different ways to utilize not only this Leo, but the other 1-drops within the game. This Leo is great because he protects any 7,000 power base or less character being removed by opponent's effects. You do have to bottom deck a character on your field to be able to keep the character that is trying to be removed from the field by effects, which oftentimes may be this Leo, but a lot of times most decks don't have like a double removal turn. So if you just bottom deck the Leo, that's enough. It's also a searchable Dressrosa 2K, which Rebecca loves having searchable 2K options, especially when they're the Dressrosa type. Viola is another searcher that can be utilized within this deck, searching for Dressrosa within the top 3, and it's a 2K on the field. And the best part is that Viola can find Rebecca, and Rebecca can find Viola. So you can kind of get like a double combo search effect off. Luffy is a searchable 2K that I see in just about every single Rebecca list, right? It's very simple in its effect. On opponent's turn, if your leader has the Dressrosa type, which is Rebecca, this character gains plus 3,000 power. So it's a 3-cost, 7,000 power body. So influential with this deck. And it might seem weird, it's like, why is it a 7,000 power body on the opponent's turn? Harder to remove. It synergizes well with Rebecca's leader effect. We'll talk about the other 3-cost characters first because I think it'll help people understand maybe about the leader effect. Sanji is a great one. He's gotten a lot of noise, especially in the blue-purple Sanji deck, but in Rebecca, he's just a really great searchable blocker that can give anything unblockable with that on-play effect, which will be a little bit more easier to understand, especially when we talk about Rebecca's leader effect and its synergy with 3 costs. Heroes is also played in just about every single Rebecca deck, right? Especially with that on-play effect if you trash a card from hand. If your leader is Rebecca, this character gains rush during the turn. Very obvious as to why you would play this card. And then, especially with the on KO effect, you can add it from the trash to your hand for free. That means as Rebecca, you're always going to have at least a 5,000 power rush character that you have access to, especially if you've got it on the field and you play it down and there's no like bottom decking potential that your opponent can do. Whether it's KO'd by effects or KO'd in battle, he's going to be able to constantly swing in. Now that we've talked about the 3-cost characters, let's go over Rebecca's leader effect. Now, it's a 5,000 power Dressrosa 5 life mono blue, cannot attack leader. Yet again, Rebecca not going to be attacking anything in this game. But it's got an activate main that if you rest the leader and return one of your Dressrosa type characters to the owner's hand, you can play a Dressrosa type character card with the cost of 3 from your hand. Does not cost Dawn. This is the big part of what I want to talk about with this leader. This does not cost Dawn. You just have to tap the leader and pick up one of your characters. Especially with the array of 1-drops that we talked about, right? With the different searchers or Leo, you can go ahead, pick one of these up after you search with them, right? You tap 1 to search, and then you go ahead, use your leader effect to pick it up and play down something like Kyros or maybe even Sanji. There's so many different options with this, right? You can do it early in the game. You could even do it late in the game. Talking about some of the other staples when I go into the combo is Sabo, right? Being able to on play if your leader is the Dressrosa type, activate a Dressrosa event from your hand, right? This Sabo on the on play as a 9,000 power blocker. If your leader is the Dressrosa type, activate a Dressrosa type event from your hand. Being able to use an array of different events. As you can see, one of these deck lists has more events than the other, but the potential synergy you can have is so nice. Especially when you've got this 9,000 power Sabo on the field that you're trying to protect. If you've got like a little Viola on the field because you searched earlier in the game, go ahead, use your leader effect to pick it back up, immediately play the Sanji down on the field to give any of your characters unblockable, and now maybe without having to pay the cost of any of your Dawn, you've now got a 9,000 power character Sabo that has unblockable that can go in for lethal without including any sort of Dawn or anything like that. There's some really cool combos that you can utilize. Obviously, because it's a blue deck, Charlotte Pudding is an option within this deck because why not? And there's an array of different characters that some people play and some people don't. The first one is Bartolomeo. Just a searchable 2k vanilla, a 6 cost 7,000 power character, or Lumbus, right? Or Lumbus has that activate main once per turn. If you place a character to the bottom of the owner's deck on your side, this character gains rush, so has really cool synergy alongside Kyros, where you have 2 different characters on your side of the field that have access to being able to gain rush. He's also got an on-KO effect of drawing 1 card, so if your opponent decides to swing into him because he is an aggressive, potentially annoying body, well, you get to replace him in the hand. He's a free draw 1, which is always pretty nice. This one that I saw, the Boa Hancock. Now, this Boa Hancock is actually quite interesting within this deck, in my opinion, right? Especially with that on play of up to one of your opponent's characters not named Monkey D. Luffy can't attack until the end of your opponent's next turn, especially when you talk about stuff like Enel with those different 6 cost boss monsters on the field. This boa is actually a really interesting counter for something like Rebecca, to where you can stun one of those characters onto the field. It's so interesting in my opinion. There's not necessarily a way that it's searchable within the deck, right? Because the Rebecca searches for Dressrosa, the Viola searches for Dressrosa, and if you play the Follow Me, I Will Guide You, this is also a searchable only for Dressrosa, so you're going to have to just naturally draw into it, which if you commit to a full playset of this boa can actually be more frequent than you would think. Now, there's 2 staple events that I see in just about every single deck list. Go ahead and use them. Mr. Luffy is a new event in OP15. On the main phase, you choose one of 2 options. Either draw 2 cards, which is so great for finding unsearchable pieces like Boa potentially, or you can give a Dressrosa type character blocker until the end of your opponent's next phase. That works so well with a card like Luffy, right? Being able on your opponent's turn to be plus 3,000 power for 7,000. You now have access to a 7,000 power blocker, which as we talked about earlier, could be very respectable within the game. Or maybe you can even do something like Viola to be a chum blocker. Or maybe if you don't want to commit the Dawn attaching to a character, you could make Rebecca a blocker. We also see barrier pistol within this deck. Very simple on the main, place up to one of your opponent's characters with 6,000 power or less to the bottom of the owner's deck. This is just so good, right? right? Especially when you have this Sabo blocker to be able to cheat out a Dressrosa type event, especially in a matchup like Boa, right? That plays stuff like Gorgon Sisters, Shakuyaku, Marguerite, the 4-cost Boa blocker. Now this 7-cost Sabo blocker can go ahead and bottom deck one of those characters so you don't have to worry about it anymore, and you don't have to take a life for removing it off the field. Barrier Pistol, a very, very good card. We're going to talk about it later with another leader from OP15, and it's definitely one that you want to try to get if you don't have one already. Now, even though this 7-cost event is not played in the list on this side, the left side, I do see this very, very frequently in a lot of different lists. So I'm going to talk about it as if it's a staple. Would You Let Me Eat the Flame Fruit, a 7-cost event on main, draw 2 cards, then your Lucy leader gains double attack and plus 3,000 power during the turn. Obviously, with Rebecca, it doesn't synergize as well, right? Because obviously your leader is not named Lucy, it is Rebecca. But having really good synergy with the 7-cost Sabo blocker means that you can utilize this on play effect to essentially draw 2 cards, right? You not only establish a 9,000 power body for just 7 Dawn, but you could just draw 2 cards. Pretty good if you ask me. Also briefly mention the Dressrosa Kingdom, which I see a lot of times, right? Especially with this on-play effect of replacing itself in the hand, similar to like Coffin Boat or Merry Go that we've seen in the last several sets. You've also got this stage that you can rest and trash an event or stage card from your hand to give a leader or character plus 2,000 power for a battle. Very, very nice in my opinion, especially if you're a deck that runs a lot of different event cards. It's a way to be able to filter through your extra stages. It's a way to be able to filter through your events that necessarily you don't need, right? Maybe clogging up the hand a little bit don't necessarily have as much value, especially because stage removal is not necessarily present in the game. Helps a lot with Rebecca's defenses, I think, to be able to filter the hand and the things that I mentioned. But if you don't want to run it, there's a couple different events that you can run instead, including Gum Gum Jet Culverin, right, that we've seen a ton in Blue Purple Sanji. Can also be played in this too, because just 4 costs are somewhat prevalent in a lot of different decks and very easy to remove, especially with an event that's as cheap as this, even though you can't cheat it out through the 7-cost Sabo. You've also got Red Rock, which we've talked about, is just a broken card. Very, very good, even though it leaves with rotation out here in the West before we get the opportunity to play with Rebecca. That's why I have this deck list over here that doesn't have something like Red Rock in it. And then also Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, especially with stuff like Enel. Even though you can't bottom deck the big Enels, if you can just bottom deck some of the small stuff, that's power to your own, especially as a leader that cannot attack. I think Rebecca is definitely viable, even though it's not necessarily a top meta contender, but we'll just have to wait and see as the meta evolves and continues. Let's go into Brook now, especially because of the FAQ that got released. A lot of people didn't really know what Brook was going to look like or do. It's a dual colored 4-life 5,000 power / green-black leader. Under the rules of the game, you do not lose when your deck has 0 cards. You lose at the end of turn in which your deck becomes 0 cards. It was also explained in the FAQ that I previously mentioned that if you go down to 0 cards, right, and then you lose at the end of turn, a lot of people were theorizing that if you used a card like the 4-cost Rob Lucci or something of the sort, you would put cards back in your deck and then maybe you wouldn't lose because then your deck doesn't hit 0. But no, as soon as you hit 0, that is it. You lose at the end of the turn no matter what, even if you add cards back into your deck, because it's an effect gained on Brook. It's not like a constant game state check that it does, if that were to make sense. But he's got an activate main. Once per turn, trash 4 cards from the top of your deck. Then if your deck is 0 cards, set up to one of your characters as active. So you have probably guessed that this is a turbo mill kind of deck. You're trying to get down to 0 kind of as fast as possible. A lot of situations, maybe not as fast as possible, but a very fast pace to be able to go into this somewhat OTK style, right? 1 turn kill, if you don't know what OTK means, where as soon as you hit 0 cards, you are going all in to win the game, right? Being able with your leader effect to restand one of your characters as active. What I have seen on Brook though though, being similar to Rebecca, as it's not necessarily a front runner of the format, a lot of these deck lists look very similar. And if you look at these two right here that I've got, they're very similar in itself, only a few cards different. The one on the right side is what I would call a general build. If you were going to play against a Brook leader, this is kind of the deck list that I would envision, what I would assume, right? It's kind of like what I would say standard. Here's where you can start out with kind of build. You only have one searcher in your deck, and that is the EBO2 Searcher Nami. Looking at the top 5 cards, finding any Straw Hat Crew kind of character other than Nami, put it into your hand, put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. Doesn't necessarily build up the trash a lot, but can really help you find a piece that you don't want to mill or that you need to play in the coming turns. You've also got a handful of 1-drops as well in Sanji, right? If your leader has the Straw Hat Crew, on play, trash 5 cards from the top of your deck. Perfect for a deck that wants to hit 0, right? Just trashing 5 cards. And then you got this guy named Spoil, right? He doesn't trash top 5 like Sanji, but on the on play, he'll trash 3 cards from the top of your deck, respectable in its own right. And then using the Activate main, if you trash this character, if you have 15 or more cards in your trash, give up to 1 Rested Dawn to one of your leaders or characters, especially when you've got stuff like the Sanji that we talked about that will turbo mill your deck, and a leader effect as well that can mill 4 cards. That already, without having any counter or extra milling, is 9 cards potentially on a 1 Dawn turn that you can utilize to be able to get 9 cards on your trash. And then comboed with Spoils, if you use it like on a 3 Dawn turn, still looking on that 9, you can then use Spoil to get to 12 cards in your trash, and then with the Activate main, trashing him adds another card to your trash as you then go into check 15. That's 13 cards in trash right there before you do anything else. Hopefully I've kind of shown you a little bit now to start of what the aggression of milling yourself in this deck could look like. You've also got a card like Tony Chopper that has that similar trash 3 cards from the top of your deck on play, but his Activate main is so important, and one of the reasons why it's a staple in this deck, that if your leader's the Straw Hat Crew type, you can add a Straw Hat Crew type character from your trash into your hand. This is especially important in any sort of turbo mill style deck, because if you played something like the OP15 Blue Nami, you've accidentally milled very important cards like Sanji's Pilaf or 1-cost Kaya that you wish you had in your hand. So this Tony Chopper kind of mitigates that potential and just grabs something from your trash that you're going to want to utilize in the future turns and can give you so much flexibility, right? Now, talking about the last couple cards that mill your trash, you've got Pirates Docking 6. He'll be an 11-cost character, 7k body, very sticky on the field in most all situations, but on the on play, you can trash 3 cards from the top of your deck in order to cheat out a 2-cost character or less, which could be Tony Chopper, could be Nami, could be Sanji, could be Spoils, or even this Zoro. This 2-cost right here doesn't do any milling as a blocker, but if on the defensive side one of your opponent's characters is going to remove a Straw Hat Crew type character other than this Zoro, you could just trash this guy instead, forfeit the blocker to be able to keep something on the field, a pseudo protection effect. Alongside the final card that can mill your trash, you've got Swallow Ban and Avant. It's a 0-cost event, but if you use it on the main phase, you do have to rest a Dawn card, so it's essentially a cost 1 event on the main phase. If your leader is Straw Hat Crew, trash 5 cards from the top of your deck. Very simple. And then on the counter phase, without having to tap any Dawn, it's a trash 1 card from hand and gain 3,000 power. A very good event for Brook specifically. Now let's talk about the ensemble of cards that you probably don't want to mill within your deck. The first one that I'll talk about is the 4-cost Nami, right? Popularized mostly in stuff like either green-purple Luffy or red-green Luffy. This 4-cost blocker that we talked about on the channel rests 2 8-costs or less, and then restands 5 at the end of turn. Just already pretty good. The reason you want to play this in the Brook deck, not necessarily for the restanding of Dawn, because you can't utilize it like red-green Luffy, resting 2 8-costs or less is so good. Like, this card is just generically good in decks that can search for it. You've got the PRBO2 blocker Zoro, very, very good card. Just another one of those things if you're facing like maybe sort of a green deck or maybe a Enel. This character cannot be rested, right? You can rest a different character when your opponent's trying to go go for game. This Brook is one of the new SRs in the deck, and this one is kind of interesting because I've seen a range of decks play like a full 4 copies of this Brook, but I've also seen some Brooks that are successful only play like 2 of these. It's a very interesting card. It has a very good on play effect of resting one of your opponent's cards. That's it. Can be a 10 cost Newgate, could be a leader, could be a stage, could be a chum blocker, rest anything, or even a Dawn. And then on the activate main, if you trash this character, if your leader has the Straw Hat Crew type, you can set up to one of your characters with the base cost of 8 or less as active, synergizing so well with Brook because then now you can have something swing potentially 3 times, continuing on that OTK style that I was talking about. And that's just the beginning of the different synergies that we can talk about with this leader. A lot of people love to play the secret rare OP15 Luffy, right? Because I mean, it's a double attack 7k. Think about swinging double attack multiple times. And it also restands Dawn for you to be able to use for different other effects, playing like a 2-drop character, playing a 4-drop Nami, playing literally any of those. Just so good in my opinion, even with that 5 cost or less stipulation on it. We'll skip ahead to the 8 cost Nami. It's only a 6,000 power character, which seems a little bit low, but in this deck, it's absolutely broken. If your leader has the Straw Hat Crew type, you can play a 7 cost or less character from the trash onto the field, and then the character gained with that effect gets Rush. Remember we just talked about this 6 cost Luffy? Well, you could play it on the field and have Rush double attack while also restanding for Dawn to be able to swing like 11,000 power Rush double attack. Isn't that kind of crazy? But the premier card to have synergy with this, you may have seen this reveal at Bandai Card Fest that we presented. It's Monkey D. Luffy, 7 cost, 7,000 power 1k character. You can apply each of the effects based on the number of cards in your trash. So especially with Brook, you could just assume that in the end stages of the game, this guy's going to have every single one of these effects. If there are 10 or more cards in your trash, this character's base power becomes 9,000 power and gains plus 10 cost. That's the cost on the field, not necessarily the cost in your hand or in the trash. So a very sticky body, right? As a 17 cost character, 9,000 power, it's going to be hard for your opponent to remove. But then if you have 20 or more cards in your trash during your opponent's turn, your leader's base power becomes 7,000. We already talked about how easy it can be to get to 12 cards in your trash. Now think about it, how easy it could be to get to 20 cards in your trash. So now your Brook is going to be a very difficult leader to be able to hit potentially unless you have some big giant bodies. But if you have 30 or more cards in the trash, this character gains another plus 1,000 power. So respectively with 30 cards in trash, this is a 10,000 power character, which by the way, with the Nami that we just talked about, can be a 10,000 power Rush character that could potentially restand as active because of the Brook, because he deals with a base cost of 8. He doesn't care about the Luffy's additional cost to be able to swing once again. But then don't forget Brook's leader effect that at the very end of the game, you'll be able to restand the character again. I think this deck in a lot of situations is relatively hard to get off, but especially when you find the right pieces at the right time. I don't know, this deck is so dangerous, especially if you're not ready for it. Dead Man's Game I also see as like 3 copies in every single deck list. You know exactly how good this card is. It's broken, especially in a searchable deck like Brook. And then really the only tech option that I see in this deck or have seen is Law and Beppo. It's a very common tech option. Some people play it, some people don't. Even though it's not searchable in your deck or being able to find it off of the trash, you can make sure that your leader can get plus 2,000 power at the end of the opponent's next end phase and combo that with something like this 7 cost Luffy, and you can make your leader a 9,000 power leader during your opponent's turn. That can be very hard for decks like Boa Hancock to be able to swing into you a lot. You can essentially like buy a turn being able to get this combo off, especially proactively resting something with Law and Beppo, because Law and Beppo's stipulation for the plus 2,000 power is having 2 or more rested characters on your opponent's side of the field. It's not being a supernova leader. It's not being a slash kind of leader or whatever. Typically, as you can see in the deck list on the right side, a lot of times if they're not playing something like Law and Beppo, it's redistributed into something like more of these secret rare Luffys or a another copy of this Nami, or maybe another copy of the Brook. We're going to talk about Don Krieg now, because Don Krieg, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting leaders, right? He very much reminds me in the games that I've watched so far of something like Goldie Roger or the Red Shanks deck from OP09. If you hit your curve, the deck is incredibly strong, but if you miss one of your pieces, there's little to no recovery, I feel like. If you don't know Don Krieg, though, he's a dual color red-green leader, East Blue Krieg Pirates, 5,000 power slash. There's a lot of slash leaders in this set. He's got two different effects. One is a Don ×1 on opponent's turn. If you only have East Blue type characters on your field, give all of your opponent's characters minus 2,000 power. That is so good, right? Because in this deck, as you'll see, they're only playing East Blue kind of characters. That minus 2,000 power is so nice, right? Especially when you talk about different matchups like Boa that we saw in the championships. Makes it really hard to be able to swing. You have to attach multiple Dawn onto these characters, as Boa specifically, to be able to swing in base 5,000 power. Talking about some of the staple cards, you've got Django, right? He's a searcher within this deck, finding East Blue, and he's got an activate main of giving an opponent's rested Dawn to one of your opponent's characters. Very much synergizes with Don Krieg's leader effect, and I don't even think I talked about Don Krieg's other leader effect, so let me talk about that real quick. Don Krieg's got an activate main once per turn of resting one of your opponent's characters that has 2 or more Dawn given. Now, your opponent can play around that by not giving any Dawn, but the cards like Django with that activate main of giving a rested Dawn to a character forcefully means that you'll be able to rest a lot of different things, and it's resting any character, does not matter the cost or anything of the sort. Copian, here's a staple, right? He's the red version of that Leo that we talked about earlier, that any of these 7,000 power or less characters on the field can be protected by this card. You have to, in this version though, give your leader minus 2,000 power during the turn instead, which we've seen in different leaders may actually not be that hugely influential, especially when you have a couple blockers or things like that on the field, or have controlled your opponent's board. Meowbin Brothers is a 2K for the East Blue Don Krieg Pirates, and on play, you can once again do that manipulation that we talked about. Now, this Arlong is so good. This is debatably one of the better cards within the set, in my opinion. I've seen this in a couple different green techs. We'll talk about them later in a video talking about characters in OP15 that get boosted from the set. He's got 2 different effects as a 4-cost 5,000 power slash Fishman East Blue Arlong Pirates type character. On KO, up to 2 of your opponent's rested cards will not become active in your opponent's next refresh phase. So it's a very sticky body on the field that your opponents will definitely ignore because they don't want their leaders, their Dawn, or their characters to become frozen. Then activate main once per turn. This is the premier spotlight of the Arlong. You can give up to 1 of your opponent's rested Dawn cards to one of your opponent's characters. And if you do, you give a rested Dawn card from the owner's cost area to one of the owner's characters or leaders, synergizing so well with Don Krieg's leader effect. And you're going to see with a couple of these different characters how this can start to add up. Brachio Mihawk, a very searchable 2K, especially with that on-play effect of resting an opponent's character with a Dawn card given, is actually really good within this deck, right? Because it's not a requirement of 2 characters like your Don Krieg says. This is just anybody that has a Dawn card given. Alvida, I see as a staple card within the deck, but it's really only like 2 of usually. I think more often than not. Alvida's got her own protection effect. If this character would be KO'd, you can trash a character card with 6,000 power or less from your hand instead. Works really well in this deck. There's a bunch of different 6,000 power or less characters that you can just go ahead and pitch, but has that activate main once per turn like Arlong. You can give one of your opponent's rested Dawn cards up to one of your opponent's characters to give a rested Dawn card to the owner's leader or one of their characters. Just once again, absolutely so good for this leader effect. And then with Morgan being a blocker, also having that activate once per turn to then give a rested Dawn somewhere else to a leader or character. These 3 cards, Arlong, Alvida, and Morgan, work so well in tandem with Krieg to be able to utilize that Dawn ×1 effect, right? We even saw in some of the stream games in that 3-on-3 championship that I talked about, the Corporate Summit, where you can play play on curve with this deck and then go ahead, utilize like Morgan or Arlong or Alvida's effects to be able to get this Rested Dawn on leader to minus 2,000 power to the field on opponent's turn, but also proactively use your activate main to rest a character. Because especially with these different characters that we've been talking about, Alvida, Arlong, and Morgan, you do have to give a Rested Dawn card from your opponent's side to a character, but fulfilling that cost, you can utilize that second part of it on either your side or the opponent's side. There's so much flexibility within this. Jin is a staple character within this deck, right? On play, if your leader has the East Blue type, you can play a character with a cost of 5 or less from your hand. We just talked about how good the 5 cost characters are or less in Arlong, Alvida, and Morgan, so this is incredible. Kuro's a really good 7 cost blocker on the field, 7,000 power. On play, you give 2 Dawn cards from your opponent's cost area to one of your opponent's characters. Then at the end of turn, up to 1 rested character with 3 or more Dawn cards will not become active in your opponent's next refresh phase. It's very specific in its wording with this Kuro, right? It's a delayed part of the on play effect, right? On play, you have to give the 2 Dawn cards immediately, but you do not check about the 3 or more Dawn cards given until the end of turn, giving you a ton of time to utilize those activate mains on the Morgan, Alvida, or the Arlong that we talked about, and even be able to utilize Krieg's resting effect to then freeze with Kuro. The last staple character card is Krieg himself. He's an 8 cost with 2 different effects. 1 on play, give up to 3 of your opponent's Rested Dawn cards to one of your characters. Then this character gains Rush. The giving 3 Rested Dawn is not necessarily a cost. To be able to get the Rush, he is always going to gain Rush, essentially. But it has to be through that on play effect. And then activate main once per turn. If this character was played on this turn, give all of your opponent's characters minus 1,000 power during the turn for every Dawn card given to that character. So, especially with the Krieg, especially with the activate mains of Morgan, Alvida, and Arlong, you can get a lot of minus power on your opponent's side of the field to be able to control board, right? Or maybe get some other additional effects of whatever, I'm not sure. It's just so good in my opinion. And if you find everything at the right time, it's so good. I know you're strong, so I'll go all from the very start. If you know the channel, you know that I was hyping this up a lot in Dracula Mihawk, and you can continue playing this if you're a big fan of Don Krieg. You want to play this deck. It's just really, really good to be able to stun 7 cost or less characters or be a 3K counter event. Just, yeah. It's just pretty solid. You've also got It's in Order, Do Not Defy Me. That is a 4K counter event on the counter side, but on main, you give an opponent's rested character with a cost of 8 or less that has 2 or more Dawn cards a stun factor to not become active in the opponent's next refresh phase. So especially with those activate mains that I talked about, this is a 1 cost freezing effect. You now have multiple cards in this that do stun in terms of events. I'll go all from the very start. Cost 3, but It's in Order, Do Not Defy Me, only costing 1. This is usually run on a full playset. The outcome will tell us who's strong and who's weak. It's a searcher card for East Blue. Now let's talk about the tech cards, because I think the range of tech cards are super interesting. I'm going to start off with the characters before I go into the different events. You'll notice that these 2 cards right here are the key differences in terms of characters in this deck, right? The deck on the left side is running Pearl, and the deck on the right side is running Shanks. Now, Shanks is really odd, right, as a card that has been pretty much exclusive in Dracula Mihawk, being able to proactively rest it, and hasn't really seen any value in any other green deck. So that's why a lot of people go with something like Pearl, right? Pearl being a 6,000 power blocker with an on-KO effect of KOing a 6,000 base power or less is nice to a lot of people. But one thing that I've really seen is that there's actually not a decent amount of those 6,000 power base or less characters that you really want to remove with Pearl's effect. It's just more valuable on the 7,000 base power to be able to rest it instead, right? The 7,000 power and 6,000 power is just a huge difference in my opinion. And especially if you do get to rest this Shanks, the minus 1000 power that he has on opponent's turn if the character is rested, plus your Krieg to be minus 3000 power on the board, can actually be killer on your opponent, right, for being able to try to swing with characters. And especially because Shanks is an East Blue type, don't forget about that, he's searchable off your Django or your Searcher event, right? So he's actually a really easy tech card to find. You don't have to worry about like bottom decking him or something like that. And one thing that we've started seeing a lot of players utilize within their deck to be able to use along this Shanks is you can be my Samurai, right? A way to proactively rest your Shanks to get that your turn effect off, and maybe on the turn that you play the Shanks, be able to have him rested to get that minus power. I really like You Can Be My Samurai. Also is something that got reprinted in PRBO2, so it is not rotating on April 1st, even though it's a block 1 card. This is a really cool one. I'm not sure if it's like 100% correct to be able to run because it is a Kozuki clan land of Wano. It is not searchable in your deck, but it's super interesting in my opinion. And the other two tech cards that I'll talk about in Dawn Krieg is Distorted Future and Electrical Luna. Distorted Future, we're just seeing this as a generically good red card. There's a lot of decks that play this. I know Ace is really loving this card right now, Red Blue Ace, especially on that main. If you have 2 or less life, you give an opponent's character minus 3000 power during the turn. This could be very, very good, especially as a 4 or 3 life leader, to be able to help control the board a little bit, be able to KO characters a little bit easier, maybe some boss monsters or things like that. And then on the counter side, it's plus 3000 power. Can't complain about that. Electrical Luna, though, we have seen how good Electrical Luna is, right? If you watch the 3-on-3 championship, how the red-green Luffy pretty much won the game because of back-to-back or Electrical Lunas, freezing an entire board and only minimizing the amount of swings that he'll get to 1, maybe 2 every single turn, can just be played in this as well, right? It's just a generically good effect, being able to freeze these 7 costs or less. Again, Dawn Krieg is not necessarily one of the stronger pieces in the meta until he really sees his curve, so if consistency and being able to finish out games on a strong note is something that can be figured out within the deck, it might be a contender within the meta at a higher scale than currently what it is. Just 2 different leaders to go. First, Monkey D. Luffy, another mono yellow Luffy leader within the game, which is weird because if I had a nickel for every time we got a mono yellow Luffy leader in the last 6 months, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. This guy is a 5 life leader, unfortunately not 6, is a Sky Island and Straw Hat Crew type, has a continuous effect which can be used on your turn, your opponent's turn, and as many times per turn. If your Sky Island type character with 6000 base power or more would be removed from the field by your opponent, you can add 1 life card from the top of your life to your hand instead. This is talking about base power, so the power minusing that we talk about with stuff like the purple Enel, not going to be utilized or mattered, I guess you could say. And this is any time being removed from the field. This is not just by effects or anything like that. This is battling characters and KOing. This is putting back to hand, bottom of the deck, putting it in life, all of those different situations. And I was a little wary when this first got revealed of how many times could you actually use this card. But we saw in the stream games that we saw that the leader effect's actually pretty solid, right? You have enough potential in healing and things like that to be able to use this several times in a game to be able to maintain your board. Now, talking about that board, we'll start out with Nami, right? Being able to be a 1-drop searcher looking for Sky Island type cards on that on play is just good for consistency, right? Most generally, everybody plays this, especially when your leader specifically calls out protecting Sky Island characters. Most everything in this list is going to be Sky Island. Now, Shura is something that I've seen in just about every single one of these lists as well because, well, he's a 2-drop searcher for Sky Island. Definitely a great card looking at the top 5 and having a trigger to play it onto the field for a free search is pretty good, even though he's not part of the Straw Hat Crew. Nico Robin, a very good 2K, especially because your leader is Luffy. Now your trigger has some viability to be able to get that 4-cost character on the field, so you love playing that. Sanji, very nice, like we saw in the starter deck 29 yellow Luffy. I can't just say yellow Luffy anymore. I have to specify where it exactly came from. Being able to find all the different Straw Hat Crew kinds of cards to put in your hand and also a trigger body on the field, where most of the stuff in here is going to be Straw Hats. Now, this Zoro, if you have not heard about this Zoro yet, this Zoro is so good in OP15. It's a 4-cost, 6,000 power Sky Island Straw Hat Crew character, so can be found through any of your searches. On play, trash a card from hand, heal a life. That's it. That's all you have to do for a 4-cost character. Again, talking about the potential survivability in this deck and being able to use your leader effect multiple times, even when you have Borsalino. Now, this deck sadly abuses Borsalino as well, even though it is not a Sky Island or Straw Hat Crew type character. It's just that good of a card. It's a blocker with the on-play effect. If you have 2 or less life, heal 1. Actually synergizes so well with this leader because now you can very aggressively take your own life to be able to protect your characters on the field and then use stuff like Borsalino or the Zoro to be able to just go ahead, heal it right back. Now, because you have a ton of different Sky Island searches, Wiper is the counter to Purple Enel for at least a lot of it. On play, you can turn 1 card from the top of your life face up, and if you do, you give all of your opponent's characters minus 2,000 power during the turn. Then you can KO all the 0 power or less characters. We talked about in Enel, where all of these different 1-drops are 2,000 power. This Wiper clears them off the board as long as there's no Holly combination on the board, which is why Holly has seen an uptick in play in the Enel decks that I was talking about earlier. But he has also got an activate main once per turn of giving Arrested Dawn to one of your Sky Island type leader or character cards every single turn. So as long as you can make sure that your top life is not face up already, this on play effect is going to be so good. And it doesn't even have to be KOing characters specifically. You can utilize this on play effect to minus 2,000 power on your opponent's side of the board to be able to then go in and swing at these characters to try to clear them. There's a lot of flexibility with this Wiper. It's very, very good SR in yellow and also just these Sky Island kind of decks that are running around, and it's probably going to be good for a while. Another card that's really good in my opinion is this secret rare 5-cost 7,000 power Luffy. If you have 6 or more Dawn cards on your field, the character is going to gain Rush, so you just can't play it on your 5 Dawn turn. That's it. This is an incredible end game card because anytime during your opponent's turn, it could be before you play this down on the field or after you play this down on the field. If before you play this down on the field, your opponent activates an event or a blocker, you go ahead, play this down, activate this effect of flipping over the top of your life cards, and this character gains plus 1,000 power during this turn per 1 cost on the revealed card. So you go ahead, flip over a Wiper on the top life. This is now a 5-cost 12,000 power Rush character. That's crazy. This Luffy has such good value, not necessarily on just playing it on curve, but as an end game finisher, because it's any time in the turn that your opponent has activated the event or blocker. Can be before you play it on the field, can be after you play it on the field. You can gain this flipping the life for plus power effect. It's just, man, this is so good in my opinion. This secret rare is kind of crazy. You've got Jinbei in this deck, which is a searchable 2K to potentially play on the field, similar to starter deck 29 Luffy would use. And then this new Robin in OP15. It's interesting because I don't see the 7-cost Robin that came out in EBO3 in every single one of these Luffy deck lists, which is crazy to say because that card is so good if you do not know. This Robin, though, kind of replaces it, maybe because it has counter on it. It's a 1K counter character that says on play, you add the top card of your life to your hand. If your leader is the Straw Hat Crew type, you add 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life, very much cycling the life as we talked about earlier. But then you can play a 5-cost or less Sky Island type character card from your hand. So not only do you get to heal 1, draw 1 card because you're adding 1 card from your life to your hand and then healing 1. So it's essentially like a pseudo draw 1. You get to play a 5-cost on the field. That's incredible value in itself. This card is so good in my opinion and is so useful within this deck, especially when a vast majority of your characters, Sky Island, Sky Island, Sky Island, Sky Island, or actually, no, that's not. Sky Island, Sky Island, Sky Island, Sky Island, Sky Island. You have so many potential options to be able to play on the field. Now, there's 2 events that are basically every single one of these different deck lists. The first one that I see a full play set of in every single list that I've seen Gum Gum Golden Rifle. On the main phase, if your leader is the Straw Hat Crew type, you can trash one card from the top of your life, then add one card from the top of your deck to your life, and then trash one card from your hand. It's basically cycling one life and then trashing one card from hand, but it's a 4K counter event, which you love to see because it's just your leader that gains it. But also think about how this could be utilized in something like Blue Yellow Nami. Blue Yellow Nami playing this card, you get basically a trash one, draw one filter effect because of this, because you manipulate the life, and then it could be a 4K counter event. Ooh, but this card definitely very good. And because you utilize 5-cost Borsalino, of course you're going to play Irei Quasar Help, right? If you have 2 or less life cards, give plus 3,000 power during the battle, and you have that trigger of playing a 5-cost egghead kind of character from your trash onto the field, which is almost always going to be Borsalino. It's especially effective as well if you're playing this Hiyori, right, that we see, to be able to manipulate the life, right? You can go ahead and manipulate the life to put this Irei Quasar Help into the life to get that 5-cost Borsalino back onto the field with the trigger, or maybe just with Hiyori, play any other one of these character cards, right? Especially in this list specifically playing 3-cost Capone Beige. Been a while since you probably thought about this card, and if you hate this card as much as I do, you definitely don't like seeing this back in the deck. Or thankfully, I should say, is going to rotate, so we won't have to worry about it in the West, but definitely if you're in the Eastern region, playing in Japan or Asia or wherever, being able to negate an opponent, leader, or character's attack overall, especially if they can manipulate it and put it in life, is that's tough, kid. And the final list that we're going to talk about is Lucy. This one I've been super excited about, right? Because I was originally very curious how Lucy was going to go, because it's kind of like a buffed version of a previous leader we've had. And it's been very shocking to see how good it actually is in this format. Now, Lucy's got 2 different effects as a 4-life, 5,000 power Dressrosa Rev Army type red-blue leader. It's got 2 effects of when attacking or on opponent's attack, you can trash any number of event or stage cards in your hand for plus 1,000 power during the battle for every card trash. Very similar to OP15 Ace, but a little bit better because you've also got this once per turn. If you have activated an event with a base cost of 3 or more during this turn, draw 1 card. Makes this a very event heavy oriented deck, playing upwards of 20 to 25 different events within this deck is so nice, right? To consistently be able to get that draw 1 to be able to essentially replace that event within your hand. There's 2 different versions that we see right here. I believe this version over here on the right side is from the 3-on-3 championship that we had featured in a couple of YouTube videos. On the left, I believe from CJ of Street Food Kings, a very popular group in Asia that test and are very strong in the card game. I think this was his winning flagship list that he got. So got a Serial Zoro out of this list. Can't be bad, right? Talking about some of the staples, let's go back into a favorite. Rebecca. I've told you about this card. It's a nice Dressrosa searcher and has the ability to be a chum blocker. You've got Leo in here as well as the protection effect, and then also Viola, just another good searcher. This list, though, a little bit different than Rebecca, has Cavendish in it, right? Cavendish is a Dressrosa type character. I know a lot of decks that have played Cavendish within the last year or so of the card game are not Dressrosa search engines. Now there's finally a searchable option for this card. When attacking once per turn, draw 2, trash 1. Just so good, right? Especially when it can be protected by Leo, as we've talked about, right? Then you've got 7 cost 9,000 power Sabo. Now, this is especially good in this deck, right? We talked about how this is just a good 9,000 power blocker, but activating a Dressrosa type event from your hand activates so many different events. Specifically looking at this one, this one, this one, and this one. And also this one, which I'll talk about here in a sec, each one of these events. But with Lucy allows you then on the activate main to draw 1 card, because all of those events that I previously mentioned have a base cost of 3 or more. That makes it essentially that this Sabo is going to be able to replace that event in the hand, because it's basically a -2 from hand to utilize the 7 cost blocker Sabo. Now it's only a -1 from the hand because of Lucy Lucy's recursion effect, right, on that activate main once per turn. I won't spend too much time on Dressrosa Kingdom because we already did talk about it in the Rebecca list, but it's essentially very good within this deck, right? Every single person plays this card just simply because you run so many more stages and event cards with your leader just based on the synergy of your leader effect. So it's a very easy one to be able to throw in and constantly get that 2000 power value from. Some of the different events that I see as staples in this deck, and no one else can have it, it's our memento of him. If your leader is Lucy, you choose one of the two options. You can either draw 2, trash 1 from your hand, and then play up to a 4 cost or less character, or you can return a stage card to the owner's hand. This is any stage card. You face against an Emu deck, you immediately play this down onto the field, and now the empty throne comes back into hand. They got to pay 7 to play it back down onto the field. Your opponent plays a Coffin Boat, or in the mirror match, they play out the Dressrosa Kingdom stage, or what's other good events in the card game right now? Now your opponent, especially in the Emu situation, like I think that this could be so good in the Emu matchup. Regardless if they start out the game by playing Mary Joie and also Empty Throne, no matter which one it is, using this 4 cost event forces the stage to go back in hand, and now regardless if they try to replay it down on the field, they cannot utilize the 10 cost effect, and they cannot use their 5 elders loop, right? Because with Mary Joie, even though it would make the 9 cost elders a 9 cost to be able to play the Mary Joie back onto the field and also the 10 cost elders, you have to rest an additional Dawn to be able to use the 10 cost elders activate main. So you get locked out of that. And then with the empty throne, right, you play it down for 7 and then you try to tap 3 to play the 10 cost elders on the field. You're in the same situation that you're tapped out of Dawn. So this is one of the reasons why I've been telling people that Emu is not very relevant in the OP15 format because of stuff like this. One thing that I've noticed a lot about with this event as well that I'll mention before I'll go on, a lot of times you're really just using this event to draw to trash 1. You're not actually using it to play out a character, right? Really, if you look at this, your ideal character to be able to play on the field is Cavendish, and you only run 4 copies of that. So, especially with this 4 cost event, right, synergizing very well with your leader effect, this is basically a draw 3 trash 1 because of that activate main. Just has so much value in my opinion, being able to filter and also just draw a ton of cards. You've also got the barrier pistol, which we talked about earlier, which is very nice to cheat off of Sabo's effect and also be able to utilize Lucy's leader effect. The Would You Let Me Eat the Flame fruit that we talked about, now getting even more value than Rebecca because your Lucy gains double attack and plus 3000 power. So now your leader is going to be swinging big. But also you have 2 different Fire Fist cards. I'll talk about the new one first before I go into the old one. This new one on 7 on main, up to one of your leaders gains 3000 power during the turn and give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 8000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. Already right there, very, very nice, especially cheating out from the 7 cost blocker Sabo to be able to control the board and also be super aggressive with your leader. But then if you trash 2 cards from your hand, you can KO a 0 power character on the field. So you have the potential to not only minus 8000 one of those characters, but just go ahead and get rid of it, right, with the KO effect. That means there's so much power in being able to control the board to remove these big giant bodies, right? It doesn't have to be a rested character. It could be an active character, but it's got to be a 0, which is so crazy within this deck. And it synergizes really well with this Fire Fist, right? Because this costing 7 that maybe you played off of the 7 cost Sabo, you still have some Dawn left over. You can go ahead, if you're at 2 or less life, you can go ahead for 2 more Dawn, minus 4000 power to one of your opponent's characters. Being able to minus off of the Fire Fist and the other Fire Fist minus 12,000 power in total means that pretty much anything on the field, right, 12,000 power and lower is going to be able to be KO'd. by one of these two effects. It is so crazy, right? And especially with the Fire Fist on the right side, you can go ahead and draw one immediately after it because of your Lucy's activate main effect to maybe draw into the Fire Fist on the left side to be able to then KO a 0 power character. Absolutely crazy, the synergy that you can utilize within this deck. I really enjoy seeing this deck, and there's a couple different tech options that you can try to do. One is a more removal kind of package that you can include in this deck, right? Being able with Jozu, right? We've talked about how good Jozu is. It's just a very good rare, not only in Ace, but blue in general, being able to bounce 6 costs or less to the opponent's hand. And also the 8-drop secret rare Rush Luffy. Not played in a ton of different versions, but I do find this card to be super interesting. Just being able, because you have so much raw draw to potentially being able to find it, can also go in with an aggressive 8,000 power body and give a Rested Dawn card to one of your leaders or characters for extra power. I do like this option. I don't know if it's correct to play, and I don't know if I would recommend playing it, but it's just awesome in my opinion. Goldie Roger, I think you definitely need to play within the deck because it's just a red deck, and if you can get your opponent to 0, slamming this guy down on the field is just so good in my opinion. There's another event that Lucy can play, Just Watch Me Ace, right? If you have 4 or more events in the trash, you can give this card in your hand -3 cost. It still has the base cost of 4 to be able to activate with your Lucy's leader effect, right, to draw an extra card. But it's a really easy way after you've played a couple turns of the game and you built up a couple different events in your trash from your leader effect, from the Dressrosa Kingdom stage, or maybe just naturally playing the game. This can be on the main or counter -3,000 power during the opponent's turn for just costing 1. This is so flexible in my opinion. I love this event. I really love playing this in the deck. And at worst, you can just discard it off your leader effect or Dressrosa Kingdom. You've also got a couple different flexible 2Ks that you can run within this deck, including Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, right? We've talked about this before. Very nice activate main of minusing 3,000 power on one of your opponent's characters during the turn. You've also got Koala as another option for -3,000 power, right? And then finally, you've got Otama, right? If you're at that 3 or less life, just go ahead and filter, draw 2, trash 1. Who can complain about that? And that's going to be all. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you liked all those deck lists. And again, you can find them all at eggmanevents.com, where I constantly upload new ones. Even after this video releases, there might be a couple new deck lists than what we showcased in this video, because I'm constantly finding them every day on like Twitter and stuff and posting them on there from different flagships, standard battles, Starbucks battles, all of that stuff. Thank you so much for watching. And again, if you want to see more OP15 content, especially with post rotation right around the corner, make sure to go subscribe to the channel to see more videos soon. And yeah, I'll see you later.